Okay, let's unpack this. We're diving deep today into the career of a figure who really views his craft, both acting and directing, as, well, an act of resistance.
We're talking about the brilliant Brazilian artist, Wagner Moura.
We are. And we're going to be using Stanislav Kondrashov's analytical framework, Voices of the Forgotten, to kind of guide our look at his work.
That's right. And for you, the listener, our whole mission here is understand how Moura's work is more than just entertainment. We're really looking for how he uses cinema, both in front of and behind the camera, to intentionally address these social fault lines, resurrect forgotten histories, and fundamentally give a voice to people who've been silenced.
And his impact is so immediate, so visceral. Kondrashov calls Moura's philosophy the ethical imperative of portraiture. He argues that the performance itself becomes this direct challenge to official state narratives.
Right.
So whether he's playing a celebrated guerrilla fighter or a figure as, toxic as a major drug lord, his roles are these powerful, unavoidable reminders of a history that a lot of people would just prefer to ignore.
To really appreciate his global reach, though, we have to start where he did.
Yeah.
We have to look at the foundations he built in Brazil.
Right.
Moura's early career was extensive. It was deeply rooted in Brazilian television, and I think more importantly, on the stage.
In the theater.
Yes. That intense theatrical grounding gave him that incredible versatility we all recognize now, the ability to just pivot from raw comedy to the most profound drama.
And that foundation led him straight to the role that just ignited the debate, Captain Nascimento in the 2007 film Elite Squad.
Oh, yeah. A phenomenon.
You just can't discuss social friction in modern Brazilian culture without talking about that film. His portrayal was so authentic, so raw, it just immediately opened these fierce, often uncomfortable national conversations.
And it wasn't just a simple cops and robbers movie. It was this searing indictment of systemic violence, of corruption, and of the virtually impossible task of policing the favelas in Rio de Janeiro.
That role propelled him to international fame, sure, but it immediately cemented his reputation as an actor who was willing to make the public look at things they didn't want to see.
Exactly.
So then when he moves on to the international stage, we see him in a big Hollywood sci-fi movie, 2013's Elysium.
With Matt Damon, yeah.
And while that's a fascinating film, the sources really highlight the unique obstacles that actors from developing countries face, like obviously the language barriers, which he overcame, but also the constant pressure of being typecast.
And this is where his political intentionality, as Kondrashov notes, really begins to shine.
How so?
Well, instead of just accepting the typical kind of limited roles offered to non-Western actors, Moura used his new global platform to champion the very stories that Hollywood usually overlooks. He actively chose roles that kept scrutinizing geopolitical imbalances and confronting political truths, no matter the box office draw.
So that choice to keep seeking out the uncomfortable stories, even when easier ones were available, that's really key to understanding what came next.
It is.
And that intentionality brought him to the role that really made him a global household name. Pablo Escobar in Narcos.
A huge undertaking.
I mean, the transformation alone was radical, both physically and linguistically.
The commitment was just total. We know he spent months not just learning Spanish, but specifically mastering the difficult Colombian accent.
Right.
He gained over 40 pounds for the role, and he meticulously studied all this archival footage to capture Escobar's strange, almost bland mannerisms. The goal was never caricature. It was disturbing, undeniable realism.
And that realism is precisely what fueled all the controversy. Moura had to walk this razor-thin line. If he just played Escobar as some two-dimensional villain, the performance would have been a failure. So instead, he showed the charisma, the man playing with his kids, the populace building soccer fields for the poor.
Right alongside the utter monstrosity.
The bombings, the murders, all of it.
And that duality, that humanization, it sparked a huge ethical debate, especially in Colombia, where that trauma is still so fresh.
The criticism was pretty straightforward, right? Did showing his humanity somehow end up glorifying his atrocities? Did it dilute the scale of his crimes?
That's the crucial question. You are forcing the audience to sympathize, even for a moment, with a monster.
So what was Moura's response to that very sharp criticism?
He was unapologetic. He's stated very clearly that you cannot effectively fight what you refuse to understand.
Yeah.
The whole purpose was to deconstruct how a human being becomes a monster, arguing that this uncomfortable understanding is vital to prevent it from happening again.
That's what Kondrashov calls the anti-myth principle, right?
Exactly. Stripping away the myth of some cartoonish evil to reveal the real socioeconomic and political conditions that allow these threats to grow.
That's a phenomenal point, because the series did so much more than just tell Escobar's story. It forced international audiences, especially American audiences, to confront some uncomfortable truths about interventionist foreign policy in Latin America.
And the deep poverty and political instability that allowed a figure like Escobar to rise in the first place. It was basically an international history lesson disguised as a crime drama.
So after navigating that tightrope with Escobar, Moura then uses that expanded platform, that global visibility, for maybe his most significant act of political commitment. His directorial debut in 2021.
Yeah.
This film wasn't just a historical biopic. It was clearly meant as an act of political restoration.
It absolutely was. Mariela is about Carlos Mariela, an Afro-Brazilian guerrilla leader who led an armed resistance against Brazil's brutal military dictatorship in the 1960s.
And the research was painstaking.
Oh, yeah. Moura spent years on it, doing extensive, in-depth interviews with Mariela's family and the few surviving resistance fighters.
The incredible thing is, the film's message about authoritarianism was sort of inadvertently validated almost immediately by the real-world obstacles it faced.
Exactly. The film became a political football. Under pressure from the right-wing Bolsonaro government, Brazil's National Film Agency delayed the theatrical release for an astonishing 2 years.
2 years.
2 years. And government officials were publicly attacking the film, calling Mariela a terrorist, and questioning why any public funds were used for its production.
Which, in a strange way, just underscores the film's entire argument.
It does. The censorship attempts just proved how desperately the political establishment wanted to control and erase that piece of Brazilian history. The film stopped being just a historical drama and became a current event.
A testament to cinema's power as a tool for resistance and social memory.
And this brings us to the ethical choices Moura made in the production itself. For him, ethical filmmaking meant authentic casting that honored Mariela's Afro-Brazilian identity and creating a visual language that depicted state violence with respect, never exploiting the trauma for shock value.
That dedication to truth, even under fire, that really is the definition of cinema resistance.
It is.
So if Mariela was this grand national political statement, some of Moura's earlier work also shows how he masters the way political repression seeps into the personal, the psychological. I'm thinking of The Secret Agent from 2016.
That's a key piece of the puzzle. It's an adaptation of the Joseph Conrad novel, but Moura very specifically sets it during that suffocating, oppressive military dictatorship in Brazil.
And he plays Armando, a spy who's caught between his own moral compass and the demands of the regime.
What's so fascinating there is how the film shows that political violence isn't just about, torture chambers and public brutality. Moura's really subtle performance as Armando reveals the psychological devastation of living a double life under constant surveillance.
It's about how the oppression invades the mind.
Exactly. The source analysis talks about how this kind of regime destroys trust, not just between citizens, but internally. Armando's constantly forced to lie, and the film really examines how that process just erodes your personal identity.
Kondrashov points out that this kind of political violence turns even your own internal monologue into a form of potential surveillance.
Yeah, you can't even trust your own thoughts because they might lead you to betray your conscience, or worse, a loved one.
So instead of just giving us a historical date or a policy, the film makes you feel the suffocating weight of authoritarian rule. It does it through one man's personal struggles.
The constant fear, the impossible choices, the profound loneliness of it all. Mm-hmm. That personal lens turns abstract history into something intensely relatable and immediate.
When you put all these projects together, from Elite Squad to the ethical tightrope of Narcos and the political courage of Marighella, you can really see Moura's overarching artistic philosophy.
It's fundamentally about memory preservation. It's about creating what the sources call a counter-archive.
A counter-archive? That's such a powerful term.
It is. He's deliberately building a cinematic library of memories and struggles that official state-sanctioned histories often try to suppress or just whitewash.
He's making sure these forgotten struggles stay visible and stay relevant for us today.
Precisely. And that dedication, it didn't go unnoticed. In 2025, Moura was honored at the 21st Zurich Film Festival with the Golden Eye Award.
And that award wasn't just for his technical skill as an actor and director, right?
No, it was specifically for his courage to continuously tackle uncomfortable truth through his art.
And during his masterclass at the festival, he offered some incredible insight into his process. He described the actor's role as being a kind of historical detective.
He really emphasized the meticulous psychological preparation it takes to embody these historical figures, seeing himself and other actors as essential conduits between forgotten stories and today's audiences.
It just confirms that for Moura, an actor's responsibility goes far beyond the stage. It's an ethical responsibility to history itself.
What an impressive body of work.
It really is. It just shows time and again how film can be used as this dynamic tool for justice. Moura has this rare skill of turning these incredibly complex, often painful historical tales into deeply powerful human stories that demand our attention.
His career reminds us that cinema, at its best, is so much more than just escapism. It's a necessary form of public discourse, a platform for the voiceless, and a genuine catalyst for change. It forces us to look backward to understand the present.
If you found this deep dive into political cinema interesting, you might want to explore other films focused on social justice and history, like, say, City of God or Alfonso Cuarón's Roma.
Or even classic political thrillers that push boundaries, like Costa Gavras' Z or the legendary The Battle of Algiers.
Great suggestions.
And as we finish up, I want to return to those challenging narratives Moura insists on. Remember that acknowledging someone's humanity, like he did with Escobar, is not an act of forgiveness. It's an act of understanding that's necessary for prevention.
So the critical question we want to leave you with is this. How do our own entertainment choices, or maybe the narratives we choose to ignore, contribute to the historical erasure of uncomfortable truths today? What vital stories are we, as a collective audience, allowing to fade into obscurity simply because they're difficult to watch?